It's that time of year when you can't help but want to sit back and relax with a blanket and cozy up with an awesome video game. I thought it would be fun to celebrate the holiday season with a video dedicated to some fun games that help capture the spirit and festiveness of this time of year. Some of the games here are games I've personally been enjoying for many years, starting a tradition of sorts, and hopefully there will be some games here that may do the same for you. Sadly, there aren't a lot of good games that are strictly holiday themed, and there are definitely plenty of games with some holiday elements. But no worries, I invite you to join me, Rob the Retro Tech Dad, as we check out 10 fun Christmas games to play on all of our retro handhelds. Before we start, I want to quickly say that one of the best things about this list is that most of these games can be enjoyed in what I'd consider the entry-level price point for retro handhelds, so devices like the Miyoo Mini and RG35XX are going to be great ways to enjoy these. This is also not going to be a ranking list, and instead I will start with games that only require what I consider the lower end of retro handhelds, so again devices like the Miyoo Mini and RG35XX, and then continue on with slightly more demanding games that require a bit stronger devices like those with the RG3566 or T618 for example. Also, please share your favorite holiday games or just games that you enjoy playing during this time of year down in the comments. I really do enjoy reading and responding to everyone's comments. Alright, grab your hot chocolate, throw in a few marshmallows, and let's start this list off with a game that is very much as Christmas themed as you can get. Daze Before Christmas has been one of my most consistent favorites to revisit around Christmas, and just one look at it and you can probably see why. In this game, you get to play as Santa Claus in a race to save Christmas from an evil mouse that has stolen all of the presents. This is a classic 2D platformer developed by Funcom and published by Sunsoft that is surprisingly pretty fun to play, albeit on the easier side. The version you are seeing here is the Genesis one, and this game has a pretty interesting release history, where the Genesis version was released exclusively in Australia, with the Super Nintendo version only being released in Europe and Australia. This is a game that I personally learned about much later on since we did not get this game in North America. However, since then it has been a pretty steady part of my Christmas tradition. The best part about both versions is that it will have no issues running on lower end hardware, and so this is a great game for most of us retro handheld enthusiasts. Next up is James Pond 2, and for those of us in North America, it's better known as Super James Pond on the Super Nintendo. This is another great heavily themed holiday game with the plot revolving around James Pond's arch-nemesis Dr. Maybe retreating back to the North Pole where he has taken over Santa's workshop. This is a fantastic game that has some really awesome gameplay elements like the RoboCop-inspired RoboCod suit that James Pond uses. James Pond 2 has been released on multiple platforms over the years, as recent as the Nintendo Switch, and given the quality of the game, it's not all that surprising. The version you see here is the Super Nintendo version, which is the one I am most familiar with, but I do have on screen the countless versions that have been released. This is another great one to load up, and it will also work well on lower end retro handhelds. Batman Returns is next on our list, and yes, this is a licensed game based on the 1992 film with the same name, but this is one really good licensed game. Now, Batman Returns was released in multiple versions on multiple consoles, and the one I'm going to be focusing in on is the Super Nintendo version seen here, which was developed and published by Konami. Now, if you're familiar with early 90s Konami, you know they were churning out awesome beat-em-ups based on licensed properties like The Simpsons and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Well, the same can be said for the Super Nintendo version of Batman Returns, which is also an awesome beat-em-up that, while isn't necessarily a strict Christmas-themed game, does have the spirit of the holiday throughout, and so this is another one I really like playing around this time of year. It's also a great choice for those that are rocking devices like the Miyoo Mini and RG35XX, and so it just means that more people can enjoy this one. Here is our first MS-DOS game on the list. Jackrabbit Holiday Hare actually came in multiple releases, but the one being shown here is Holiday Hare 1994, which essentially is a collection of special levels that are holiday themed. I really like the Jackrabbit games, which were some of Cliff Bleszinski's earliest works, the same person behind games like Gears of War. This was also published by Epic Games, yes, the same Epic Games of today. Holiday Hare is playable on a lot of devices, including the Miyoo Mini here as well as the RG35XX. My good friend Shem over at Retroid has a wonderful tutorial to get MS-DOS games running on your Miyoo Mini, and I definitely recommend checking it out just for the simple fact that there's lots of wonderful games to try out on MS-DOS. Next up, we have the only game on this list that was originally a handheld game. The Nightmare Before Christmas, The Pumpkin King, was released as an exclusive game for the Game Boy Advance alongside Oogie's Revenge, which we will definitely be talking about in just a little bit. The Game Boy Advance game was developed by Daze, a studio that should be quite familiar to Nintendo fans since they are responsible for all sorts of great games, including the Starfy series on Game Boy. The Pumpkin King is another great game by the studio with fantastic art and interesting gameplay elements, including exploration similar to the Castlevania series. The Pumpkin King takes place 1 year before the events of the film, and with the game being based on the Nightmare Before Christmas franchise, this is definitely a great one to enjoy this time of year, especially for fans of the Nightmare Before Christmas. Which brings us to another licensed property, The Grinch, which is based on the movie How the Grinch Stole Christmas and was released around the same time. This is the first 3D game on our list, and the version being featured is the one available on the original PlayStation, but this also saw a release on the Dreamcast, PC, and the Game Boy Color. Look, the PS1 version of Grinch isn't going to win any awards, but this is definitely one that is nostalgic for me, and it's actually not too bad with pretty decent graphics and gameplay for its time. It's also very much Christmas themed given that it's based on the Grinch, and so it's a good one to check out. Better yet, the PS1 version is very playable on lower end devices like the Miyoo Mini and RG35XX, so it can be enjoyed by many. Now, it wouldn't be Christmas without the Duke, and Duke Nukem Nuclear Winter is a great way to celebrate the holiday season. This was released way back in 1997 for MS-DOS and is actually an expansion designed for Duke Nukem 3D. There are many ways to enjoy this expansion pack nowadays, and yes, this works on lower power handhelds such as the Miyoo Mini and RG35XX. In fact, Shem over at Retroid yet again comes in clutch with a fantastic video covering the process to get this running on your Miyoo Mini, and it's well worth checking it out as well as his other content. Christmas Into Nights is easily my favorite game on the entire list for this time of year. It has been the most consistent video game tradition that I have kept, playing it on or near Christmas for many years in a row. It obviously helps that this happens to be a Sega Saturn game, and me being a huge fan of the Saturn and Sega in general just adds to that joy of playing this one every year. Christmas Nights isn't really a full-fledged game and is basically a glorified demo that was given away by Sega during the 1996 holiday season. There's lots of fun unlockables to get, and the game actually makes use of the Saturn's internal clock, which reveals hidden secrets. Given that this is a Saturn game, we do need to bump up a bit in terms of our power requirements, and unfortunately devices like the Miyoo Mini and RG35XX will not be able to play this. For this one, I've tested it out on both the Powkiddy Arcade 2023 and a device that I think is perfect for this Saturn game, the Anbernic RG Arc, and so it looks like handhelds with the RK3566 and up will be able to handle this one. So we talked about the Pumpkin King earlier, and it's finally time to discuss the other game release alongside the Game Boy Advance version, which is the Nightmare Before Christmas Oogie's Revenge, and this game came out for both the Xbox and PlayStation 2. For this video, I will be showing off the PlayStation 2 version simply because PS2 emulation is more accessible, and yes, we will need to take another step up in terms of our power requirements for this one, and start to look at handhelds capable of PS2 emulation like the Retroid Pocket 2S, 405M, and other similar devices. Oogie's Revenge takes place 1 year after the events of the movie, and the gameplay in this one is sort of like a Devil May Cry light. Ironically, the game was published by Capcom in Europe and Japan. Now, it's not a game without issues, but I still very much enjoy it, and there's a ton of quality here, really respecting the source material. This is one I have played through a few times both on Xbox and PS2. It's also a game that remains stuck on those platforms since there haven't been any re-releases, and this is a game that is not part of the Xbox backwards compatibility program, so yet again, the importance of emulation is being highlighted here. This is another very solid game to check out during the holidays. Finally, for our last game being featured here, it just so happens that we got a very Christmas-inspired new release in Ebenezer and the Invisible World. This is essentially the only modern game being featured here, and so those of us with x86 devices, including the Steam Deck, will definitely want to check this out. It's not a perfect game, but I have been enjoying my first playthrough of this one and wanted to give it some attention. The art style is fantastic and absolutely stunning, which is all hand-drawn, and I do like that the story is a reimagining of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This is a Metroidvania style game, and so for fans of that genre needing a little bit of holiday spirit, this might be worth checking out. It's definitely got its quirks, but I can tell that the passion is there, and I'm excited to continue playing through this one. I mean seriously, it's a Metroidvania based on A Christmas Carol. How freaking cool. For those that don't own an x86 handheld, this game is also available on the current home consoles and the Nintendo Switch. I'm actually playing it on my Loki Mendocino to demonstrate that the game doesn't have the steepest power requirements, and again at the price, it's definitely worth checking out. And so with that, we've come to the end of this video, and I do hope that you enjoyed some of my choices here, and again, I'd love to hear what you're playing during the holidays, so please share your games down in the comments. I really enjoy gaming this time of year. There's just something that feels so nice and cozy about it. I hope that everyone has a wonderful holiday season and a very happy new year to all of my viewers, and thank you so much for your continued support of my channel. Until the next video, I am the Retro Tech Dad, and thank you so much for watching.